Welcome to Disruptive Capitalist, the show where purpose-driven entrepreneurs and bold investors share how they're reshaping the world by investing time and money in a way that improves lives and creates wealth. So let's get to it. Hey everyone, thank you for joining us again for another great episode of the Disruptive Capitalist podcast. Today, my guest is Amanda Cassar, who is calling from the Gold Coast of Australia, one of the places I've always wanted to go, but have not been. Sometime soon I will make it out there. But Amanda specializes in empowering small to medium business owners to build and protect wealth through strategic financial planning at Wealth Planning Partners. She also does quite a bit of really interesting nonprofit work. Amanda, thank you so much for joining the show.
Thank you for having me, and I look forward to welcoming you down under.
Yeah, it's happening. It's going to happen.
Good.
So tell us a little bit more about who you are, Amanda, and what you do.
Sure. So the Wealth Planning Partners kind of happened by accident, as a lot of financial advisors in Australia would tell you. I'd never heard of a financial advisor when I left school. So I went to work for a friend of my dad's who sold life insurance, and over time sort of moved on from being his secretary to his personal assistant to the office manager, and eventually became an advisor myself after I'd had my children. So now proud mum of two kids who work in my business with me. So family business,
Wonderful.
which adds extra layers of complexity.
Yeah.
And my son's had two children in the last 2 years, so grandma as well. So keep me very busy
beautiful.
on the home front. We're building our fourth home at the moment, so that's taking a lot of time, and looking after clients in between.
That's wonderful. That is wonderful. So, what kind of wealth planning do you guys do?
So we look after our version of the 401ks, which we call our superannuation or pension accounts. We have mandatory contributions by our government of 12% on top of our gross wage here goes into our pension funds. I do risk insurance, so life insurance, trauma, and I also have a small business that does what many call long-term care or aged care advice as well. So if mum and dad need to go into a nursing home, we have up to 4 layers of daily fees here to cover that, which is moving to 5 in November possibly. So it's quite a complex area of advice, so something I also have a specialty in.
Very interesting. Very interesting. What's your, and you do all of that in Australia. Do you guys invest overseas or primarily in Australian markets?
We can invest overseas. We have Australian listed investments in most of the large share indices around the world, so can use the NASDAQ and S&P and all the rest. Most via like an ETF style structure or managed fund based within Australia though. Some limited amount to direct stocks on those exchange through one of the brokers. I often say that the Gold Coast is like the Florida of Australia. It's beautiful weather, lots of theme parks, and a lot of people come here to retire. So lovingly refer to it as God's launching pad for for the aged care advice.
Oh, that's great. There's a big group of folks moving in that direction. Certainly in the U.S., as we call them, baby boomer generation is retiring in massive numbers over the next 5 to 10 years. It's going to become a really hot button issue before very long.
And Gen X are really that sandwich generation. They've still got young children at school or high school. Like I said, I'm a grandmother. My best friend has a 9-year-old. And, our parents are aging. My grandmother's still alive. She's 90 and in a care home. My parents, dad's in his 80s, mum's in her 70s. So, it won't be too long before we are looking after young children and elderly parents and sandwiched between. So it's definitely happening.
So what kind of advice are you giving people right now about the markets?
I think there's a lot of geopolitical risk in markets, and that's spooking a lot of people. Depending on their age, if they're approaching retirement and need to protect the capital that they've earned, we take quite a conservative approach, knowing that there's still 20 or 30 years of that money has to last them. For those who are a lot younger and still accumulating, it's 20 or 30 years to retirement plus another, these days, 20 or 30 years in retirement, their money's good for 60 years. So they can afford to take a more aggressive approach to keep growing their retirement funds. Obviously, it depends on the purpose of the money. If long term it's that they want to grow quite aggressively for their retirement, we can afford to take some risks. If they're putting aside for a housing deposit, we're going to be much more conservative with that money. So the purpose has a lot to do with how we invest.
Purpose-driven investments. So there's the purpose of the investor, and then there's the purpose of the investment itself.
Absolutely.
A lot of geopolitical risk, I think, is pretty common feeling right now in the marketplace. Are you advising people to hold money or to invest, but just invest differently?
Again, it depends really on the client. Some absolutely love what's happening right now and others are terrified. So it depends completely on their attitude toward risk. Those who are more conservative, we are doing more of the fixed term, capital protected style investments. Others who just love the market and want to be part of what's going on. But we are investing, but with diversification in mind as well, to spread that risk.
Awesome. That's great. So before our call, we talked a little bit about, how you made a gigantic leap in your life, and it was one of the best decisions you've ever made. Tell us about that.
There's a networking group for women in Australia called Business Chicks. And I decided to become a part of that, as you do. And they would partner with a philanthropic group called the Hunger Project, which is a global network. They're based also in the States and Sweden and around the world. And they partner with various developing nations that need help. And each year they'd organise a trip to one of these developing nations to do a leadership and immersion program, which I'd, watched for a few years. These women come back and raving about their stories. And I used to think, oh, they're so cool to do that. That's pretty amazing. Look at them go.
Yeah, look at them. That's great.
Yeah, good for them. The CEO actually approached me when they launched on the Gold Coast one time and said, look, why don't you do one of these trips with the Hunger Project? And it was one of those sort of, I suppose, slap up the side of the head with a brick moments. And I just sort of went, oh, that's what other people do. It was one of those, me travel, to Africa to do that, a leadership program.
Yeah.
And I realized after a while, like everything I came up with was an excuse. None of it was a good enough reason. Look, I'm running a business. I've got teenage kids. I couldn't possibly, not be there to cook my husband a meal for a couple of weeks. So, there was all these, excuses I was making, and it just came down one day to, why don't you just say yes and see how it goes? And yes meant not only heading off to Africa, I had to fundraise $10,000 for the charity, which I'd never done fundraising in my life, and also cover my own costs. So like economy costs 10 or 11 years ago was still around $5,000 to get to the other side. I mean, Australia is, the bottom end of the universe, and it's a long way anywhere.
Yeah.
So it was a big leap to do it, but I ended up just realising, stop the excuses, say yes and see where it goes. So we were supposed to head off to Ethiopia on that trip in 2015. There was political risk there at the time. It was a bit too dangerous, so we ended up in Uganda. I loved it so much. I went back to Malawi the following year and ended up in India in 2019. It just got under my skin and under my blood. When you're learning leadership from probably the poorest people on earth, it's a beautiful lesson in humility and also a perspective change, because you can come back and, again, we make all these excuses in our business life and our personal life, and we put things off until the time is right. And to learn from people, who'd lived generations in poverty, and someone said one day, look, we can help you. instead of going, yeah, right, whatever, it's always been this way, it always will be this way, to actually go, you know what, I'm prepared to give that a try and turn entire families and villages and communities around so that, you know, nobody's left behind and they're not living in poverty anymore is an incredibly eye-opening and beautiful process, because you're watching these people so proudly share this journey that they've had of what they had to do, the little steps along the way to overcome this huge problem. I mean, the government's not going to save them. The
No.
elders of the tribe aren't going to save them. Aid
Yeah.
organisations come in and do handouts and leave. That's not going to save them. So,
Nope.
you know, they have to save themselves. And that's a magic choice to make.
You know, it's amazing what you learn when you do that. Like you just said, these nonprofits that drop in, hand them a bunch of free stuff, and then leave. That's not super helpful. A lot of it just goes in the trash, or it gets bartered, or is completely useless from the beginning. I've spent a fair amount of time in a dozen or so of the poorest countries on the planet, and it shapes your. The more time you spend, the more it completely just changes the way you think. And we don't know poverty until you go there, you know. In the U.S., you can see a little bit of poverty, like true poverty, in the Indian reservations, which is ironic because they get free money, but I guess it really depends on the tribe. It's the government is not going to save them. The only thing that will save them really is what's been proven to save people over and over again is some form of capitalism, which, you know, I worked at USAID for a year. Fantastic experience there. Lovely people, lovely place. I worked with a lot of nonprofits, and I just felt like the nonprofit model, it does a lot of good in the world, but it's also broken.
Very true. The model with the Hunger Project I learned was about mostly empowering women at a grassroots level, enabling them access to microfinance loans, so as little as $50. They're trained very, very hard on what to do with that, because obviously there's financial abuse, even at, you know, that level where a husband will,
Oh,
you
yeah.
know, want to take it and drink it. But they're trained very clearly on how it's, you know, to start a small business, to improve what they already have, to grow crops, to, you know, get animals. One lady proudly showed us all her chickens and her pigs that she'd been able to breed from a very small microfinance loan and help others in the community. So, you know, not only having meat but eggs that she could then sell and grow until she was supporting not just her immediate family but, you know, extended family and the village, and then learned how to do business, go to the markets. You know, so very, very basic capitalism, really, but doing incredible things. All good.
All
Did
good.
it record that last bit that I said, or
No, go ahead again if you want.
trying to think the question?
The you know, as we talk about, you know, how capitalism can help make a difference in places like that, and you're talking about microfinance loans, and you know how you know, even a $50 loan could be a big deal for these women, as long as the husband or the man there doesn't go and drink it all away. You know, is that something? So you saw that
Yeah,
happen?
absolutely. So the Hunger Project would train them in how to spend and get the most out of that money. So if they already had crops, it would be how to get the most out of the crops, how to take them to market and get good prices. If they didn't have anything, it would be how to start small with perhaps chickens or pigs, and then use the eggs or the meat, or breeding them with, you know, other people who'd gotten the same sort of thing. So yeah, one lady very proudly showed us her little herd of piggies, and another one all her chickens that she was able to help. And they they love to pay it forward. So they would, assist with the eggs or give somebody else a rooster and a chicken so that they could start their little herd or flock as well. So it was a really beautiful thing to watch how something simple in action can work really beautifully. I think there's, in microfinance around the world, when it's done properly, there's something like a 2% failure rate of loans that aren't repaid. So it's a very simple and very effective way for, those people in dire poverty to learn to get ahead.
I agree. And I know there's been critics of microfinance saying you're charging too high of interest. And I know, look, that is risk, there is risk involved, but it's lower interest rates than what the credit card companies charge people. So I think get off your high horse and let people borrow at a rate that they, can change everything for them.
Yeah. And look, I don't think there's too many perfect systems on earth. We just work with what we've got, don't we, and make the most of it.
Yeah, there's not. And so I've enjoyed our conversation. I love how you found purpose in your own life. And as you keep your finger on the pulse of geopolitics and the risk involved as you advise people about wealth, how has that, your nonprofit experience or the volunteering and so forth, how has that informed your for-profit side of the house?
I think it's probably a lot more heart-led and people first. So instead of just a cookie cutter approach of this is how we do it here, everybody goes into either an index fund or a separately managed account, or this is just, listening to people and what they want. Some people these days are very focused on, I want to do better for the planet. I want, investments that are making a difference. I want socially responsible management of funds. So I'm not going to put them in a cookie cutter balanced index fund that may have exposure to all the things they don't want. It's not listening to their story. So being able to do that, have that tailored approach for people. I know that's touted a lot, those words, tailored financial planning. But it is true. You have to be able to not just throw everybody into what's easy for you to manage, but listen to what the people want. It also gives me that massive dose of perspective where, we do make excuses and we'll put something off. Whereas now I'm a lot more willing to say yes to the things that are a hell yes and no to the things that are just I don't want to put my energy there. So it makes those decisions a lot easier. Becoming a new grandma, that's it. I'm having Fridays off while the babies, before they go to school. I just want that relationship with them. And I'm not sure how that'll work looking after my clients, but I'm going to make it work. So those kind of decisions become a lot easier when you have that perspective about what's really important.
I love it, because that's what really is important. Amanda, thank you so much for being on the pod today. How can our listeners find you?
Well, there is another Amanda Cassar, but she does yoga in America, so it's not her. I am on LinkedIn, so please reach out on LinkedIn if that's your forum. You can also find me on X and Facebook, so I am on all the socials.
Awesome. Thank you so much for joining the pod.
Thanks for having me.
If this episode shifted your thinking, then share it with someone bold. And remember, capital is a tool. Use it to build a world you are proud to live in.